Well, in the SteamHammerVR project, I was the artistic director. It was, originally my sort of sketches on a piece of paper, my few scattered words that turned into what became, quite an epic game, really.
I was asked to create a music for a VR steampunk game. The idea was good, the sketches were very promising, and the location seemed to be perfect for the game. I'm in Victorian London. I like steampunk mood, so I was happy to be a part of it.
My role was graphic design and level design. What I would do is actually get the sketches that were actually drawn up and the locations, and actually use Unity to actually create the actual level.
My main role in SteamHammerVR was the creation and the recording of various different voices for characters. I also recorded a lot of the background noise and street chatter.
So I'm chief programmer, head developer for SteamHammerVR games. So my main role was writing scripts that are responsible for example for enemy movement, for enemy behavior, how the weapon works, how everything works in our game.
The clockwork and the steam.
When it comes to the world and the story of SteamHammerVR, it was very much a case of necessity being the mother of invention. Now, Mark and Tom had just come back from the 2020 summit, and one of the things that they had learned was maintaining smooth frame rates and the necessity to have very simple models. Low polygon models. They can be high resolution, but generally the models keep them as simple as possible, because there's an awful lot of processing that goes into the movement patterns of characters, their animations, the way the lighting effects work on them. So I had to come up with a character design that was very simplistic, very basic, but one that wouldn't look out of place. So for me, the idea of a clockwork mouse was where I started it. The idea of SteamHammerVR, of course, was to be set in a Victorian London, a steampunk world, and rather than a shooting game, and there's a lot of shooting games out there, this was going to be hand-to-hand melee combat. It was going to be bashing creatures face to face. There was going to be lots of small creatures scurrying around on the floor, or indeed giant clockwork robots marching their way towards you. And did I have the whole world set out from the beginning? Probably not, no. I mean, in fact, if you go back to the very, very first note that I ever made, there were certain things there that are right. That the name Steamhammer is there, the character Obadiah Springhorn is listed, even the dastardly Professor Ratworm. These were names that, I plucked out of thin air, thinking that I'd come up with a story later on. And as it happens, story is very much a key part of our game. There's a lot of very good VR games out there, but not so many of them have got such a strict narrative as ours. The missions are based on solving various puzzles, trying to get to grips with who this Ratworm fellow is. And in fact, as you play through the game, more and more of that story is revealed to you.
People of London, this is Professor Ratworm. The Industrial Revolution is over. The time of clockwork begins.
When I was going to create a track to specific scene or moment in game, I was trying to know as much as possible, like everybody else who's doing that, about the scene, situation, details. I was speaking to our artistic director, to main programmer, to find out what it's all about and what limitations I need to stick to. Then I was trying to imagine what forms of expression I want to use, what music genres, what instruments or sounds should fit the mood. And for me it was very hard in the beginning and become harder when I realized that music should reflect changes during the gameplay. Sometimes the inspiration is quite obvious. For example, the sewer scene, I knew that music should be dark. Another example, Predator scene, should be quite happy and little uplifting. The Limehouse scene was described very well, so I had no problems starting the track. But I remember that the first version of the track was too bright and sounded like happy pirate theme. And sometimes it's very hard to start a new motif, so I'm trying to browse sounds or generate new ones for the track. It's a good starting point if you don't know how to move forward.
Well, I play 3 main characters in SteamHammerVR. When I'm trying to create a voice, I visualise what the character might look like. For someone like Dr. Springhorn, of course, he does actually appear in the game, so that wasn't as hard for me. But I visualise what I think the character looks like and what sort of voice that they might have, and then I sit in front of my computer and experiment with voices.
My name is Dr. Springhorn. And you? You are the Steam Hammer.
I'm going to be really egotistical and say that my favourite character is Dr. Springhorn. I've loved helping write the script for him and I've really enjoyed performing him as well. But I think if I was going to choose a character that was my favourite that I didn't perform, I'd have to say that it's Inspector Lestrade. I really, really liked the way that our artistic director played him.
From the gamer perspective, for sure it will be Skellington Arms. It's very unique, it's very funny level. It's quite small, but everything happens very, very fast, and the things that you can do in that level, put the lights out, move table, destroy bubbles, barrels, a lot of things. It's very, very funny, and I love it. From the programmer perspective, I think there are a couple levels that I like most. For sure, Limehouse, because of the attention to details. The last level, which has very funny Easter egg, and Westminster Bridge, which was the most hard to do level. I think it works quite good.
When it comes to designing SteamHammer, I'm sure a lot of people aren't aware that you can't just take a shooting game template off the shelf and then put in your characters. Tom, our head designer, has literally had to create the game engine from scratch. And also, what we initially designed is not what we finally come up with. The very first thing he ever designed was something called Box Killer. We initially just had simple square boxes that would move towards you in a vaguely threatening manner, and if you hit them, in fact, initially it was a gun, but he did actually put a very basic looking steam hammer in there. When you hit them with a hammer, they would explode and these small balls would roll out. The initial idea for that was, if we could create a moving object which could explode to scatter smaller objects, then we've got the basis of a game. We've got a game where clockwork automatons, which is basically an inanimate object, rolls towards you with some degree of animation. Then, when you destroy it, it shatters into a spray of cogs and springs. That is when you suddenly start to get the feeling that that's a real thing.
Well, from my perspective, the most important thing is to start as soon as possible making real things, real games, so you can design a very simple game and try to do that. And the very, very important thing is not to be afraid, ask people for help. And there are a lot of people on forums that will be very, very happy to help you. So start making your game as soon as possible.
The most important thing is to realize that in real environment, we can hear very big amount of sound. And it's important to estimate proper sound sources volume relations and the ranges. The whole work is based on mono sounds you put in the environment, but sometimes you can cheat a little and use some stereo tracks, for example, when you experience massive white sounds as storm, big explosions, rain. If you can add good samples, set them into the scene with proper volume ranges, then there are many effects that you can add later and simulate specific places. I think reverb is used mostly. The most difficult thing for me was changing stereo to mono sound, because after this process you are losing a lot of depth. But obviously it has to be like that. Then you have to rely on applications, binaural engine that delivers sounds to your ears. It's different than standard stereo, but when you realize that the player can feel the sound direction, it's awesome.
The hardest level to design was St. Paul's, purely just because of the size of it, and just also to make sure that it didn't all look the same, and also make sure that the size of St. Paul's was pretty much on to scale as you're looking through, and also did a bit of research to see what St. Paul's actually looked within that year.
One of the things that we knew we'd have trouble with doing is creating lifelike characters on screen, photorealistic characters. Creating the CGI, the rigged movement of the mouth, all of that was going to be very, very difficult. So to some extent, we decided to sneak around it. We took a shortcut by using actual live actors. We were going to use Gavin as the voice actor for the performance anyway, so it seemed to make sense that since Dr. Springhorn was the most important character of the game, that he should be a visible character. And in fact, when we first tried it, we used a weird sort of rubber mask on him with like a big nose and an enormous moustache. The problem is that rubber mask was actually hiding the real man underneath, and he wasn't able to emote and express as well. So we took the mask off, we added the moustache, had to keep gluing it on with very, very nasty heavy glue, but we were able to create a character who is very much the face of our game.
SteamHammer, we've received an urgent Mayday call. It's from Ratworm.
You're doing very well, SteamHammer. Keep smashing those clockwork rodents.
Well, I think most people think that developer is writing code for the most of the time, but I think the most important thing is designing code, designing a proper architecture of the code. So it will look nice and work nice, and it will be ready for porting, for example, for other projects. Also profiling your code, debugging your code. So this is things that you are spending most of the time on that. The biggest challenges, well, make sure that everything that you plan for the day has been done.
I'd say just keep speaking aloud, listen to different people's voices, copy them, be a mimic, just copy voices that you hear on television, hang around with people with different accents. Also, I'd say that pick a decent program as well, buy a decent microphone, record lots of audio, and there are so many websites out there now that will actually take a voice reel and will feed back things to you and give you advice on creating different voice reels and things like that as well. So I think the key thing really is do a lot of recording, do a lot of practice, and buy a decent microphone and get a decent program as well.
Well, I can give an advice that works still for me. It's very useful. Try different approaches, themes, instruments to get proper mood. Try not to be in a hurry. Take a break if you think you reached the dead end. Listen something else, something good, and go back again to your idea or develop it or leave it and try something else. Everyone is exposed to, I have no idea what to do now. And this is a specific panic feeling when the deadline is soon. But don't give up.
In a world dominated by clockwork monsters, your only defense is the power of steam and a hammer.
The writing of SteamHammerVR kind of went in two different directions because we were determined from the very beginning that SteamHammerVR was going to be a narrative-driven game. There's an awful lot of shooting games out there, there's an awful lot of adventure games out there, but there's very few VR games which have got a very strong narrative structure. So we wanted to have that kind of 3-act play principle over the space of 10 levels. It eventually became 11 levels, but 10 levels. So the first section of the story was very much learning to be the steam hammer, learning how to use the weapons, learning all of its various techniques, how to defend doors by building up defences, how to use the smart system to move around a space. All of those early levels are very much giving the player the time to learn how to use the game and understand that the levels will be different and the enemies within those levels will also be different. The middle act was designed to be the tragic part of the story. We were actually going to kill off our main villain at that start of the end of Act 2, really. So at that point, we had a scenario where the main villain was dead, but there was still a lot more story to go. So we came up with the concept that since Ratworm had been killed by his own creations, the automatons were completely rampant. They were loose over the streets of London, and it was determined that we had to clean up the streets and sort of maintain order, which led us to the stories where we were actually evacuating London. The final act is, of course, the resolution of the piece. In that final act, we discovered the source of the control signal, and if you've got that far in the game, you'll know how the story ends. We'll leave it at that.
Well, I always want to be part of game industry, and making games, it was something that I always wanted to do. And I remember when the first time I experienced VR, it was something that changed my life. It was a mind-blowing experience, and I love it. So making VR games is something that connects those two experiences, and it's connecting my both dreams to make something for VR and my biggest dream, make games.
I think my favourite mission in SteamHammerVR is the Waterloo Arches. That train that goes across the top of the arches as well is a beautiful visual. And I also love smashing all the boxes in the various warehouses. There's also a really nice variety of different enemies to destroy in that level as well. And it's quite a grand scale, so that's definitely my favourite level, and I've really enjoyed testing in that level as well.
Yeah, my favourite mission would be St Paul's, purely down to the size and the scale of it. And your main object is to protect the carriages, mainly from the ravens. But not only that, you've also got ground automatons like the rats to contend with as well.
Certainly St. Paul's level. This scene is huge, gives you free movement and specific tension when you need to defend the wagons. There are ravens everywhere. I have the feeling that they appear from nowhere, but thanks to specific arrangement of this level, you can get them from many places, and you need to be focused and you need to be accurate. I love it.
Well, there are loads of Easter eggs in SteamHammerVR, actually. If you listen very carefully, you can hear Jack the Ripper. You can hear various interesting conversations in the streets. But I think I really like what we've done with the park benches. Every single park bench in SteamHammer has a different plaque and some different wording on it. And there's some very, very funny plaques on those benches.
It's actually an awful lot in SteamHammerVR. I'm sure that, when you are playing the game, the heat of the moment, you're just focusing on the rats and the ravens. But for me, there is a whole world within a world in SteamHammerVR. We took a lot of time and effort into making the posters and little details like the names that you see on the barrels and the little plaques that you see on the park benches. Everywhere you look in SteamHammerVR, there are references to the people who created the game and also references to things that were happening at that real time within the world of Victorian London. For instance, our game is set in 1892. I found out that Charlie's Aunt, the play, a farce, was actually released in 1892. That's why if you look around the levels, you will find posters for Charlie's Aunt. There is posters for fictitious food items, for instance. There's Bellinger's Butchers. Bellinger is, of course, Mark Bellinger, our executive producer. You'll find Riemann's Gentleman's Relish, which sounds rather rude, but it's actually a kind of fish paste. And Riemann is obviously Gavin Riemann, and he is the voice of Dr. Springhorn.
I think it's the Easter egg that is in the last level, but I'm not going to say what it is. And the reason I like it most is because I designed that.
Well, my favourite Easter egg is actually the plaques that are on the benches. When we first started, they were actually all the same, but we managed to alter it and actually change, so they're actually random, and you've also got to have a look to see what they actually say.
I recommend everyone to listen carefully to street people dialogues. They make the game really immersive. These dialogues are brilliant and many people were engaged to do this stuff. Try maybe to find Nikola Tesla speaking with Franz. That's also a situation.
Early on, we came to the conclusion that if we only give the player one weapon in that first level, it makes for quite a dull first level. And also, different gamers have got different play styles. Some people will like to use the hammers, some people would prefer to use a long-range weapon like the railgun, some people like to use the combination of different weapons. And in fact, what we discovered was that our combinations of weapons became very much a selling point of the game. The idea that you are dual wielding, you can have different guns in different hands. And then it led to things like the voice commands, where we started using certain keywords to unlock combinations. A steam cannon and a steam hammer, a steam cannon and a Tesla ray, 2 Tesla rays, 2 railguns, that kind of thing. Another thing that was also designed but never actually implemented was a rotor hammer. We did put the rotor saw into the game, it was a big whirring blade of death, but initially we also had a rotor hammer, which was 2 small hammers that rotated using a locomotive piston. Some of our early testing with that game was actually pretty good. The weapon would spin and it would kick the rats the entire length of the game, but unfortunately, that one was put to the side and actually replaced with the railgun, which has proved to be one of our most popular weapons.
Well, this is something probably that not everybody will notice. I always pay a lot of attention to the performance and how the game works, so I'm very happy with results, especially that we have a lot of special effects, we have volumetric fog, and it still works perfectly smooth and fine. So definitely this is something that I'm most proud of.
Yes, I think I like the most tension. It's dark, disturbing, and creates nice unknown mood. It's in maze level.
It's probably between two. It's either the Barrel of Fear. I love the Barrel of Fear. I think that they look incredibly shiny. They look very expressive. Their silly little flapping arms attacking you are just hilarious. But I really like the giant beef eaters. I think they're very cool. I think the fact that they stand nearly 10 feet tall is amazing. One of the great things you can do with VR is create a sense of scale. And the fact that these things are so very, very tall and they've got that enormous axe, they make for a really quite dramatic character.
Well, definitely from the early beginning, I will try to do the design code in such a way so it will work on different platforms and will be not so connected with one platform. And this is the mistake that we have made at the beginning. And for sure, I will be planning more time for debugging and profiling and testing things.
When we first designed SteamHammerVR, there was actually going to be no locomotion at all. Our very first demo we ever released had the player stuck in one spot and with the creatures coming towards them. We got back people's feedback. They said, we don't want to be stuck in one place, we want to be able to move, so we started to create locomotion. We were quite determined as well on that our locomotion had to be in keeping with the design of the game. The idea that, we're talking about basic electronics, we're talking about steam, we're talking about clockwork. So the idea that rather than actually walking around the arena, you were being pulled around the arena by magnetic attraction, that kind of worked with our theme. So when you are creating a game, be prepared to make changes. Be prepared to listen to feedback. And also be prepared to accept the fact that your game is not necessarily going to be liked by everyone. When we first started doing this, we got some negative feedback and we took it to heart because, it was our baby. We thought that we were doing the right thing. We knew that we were doing the right thing. Sometimes you've got to prepare to accept the fact that there are gamers out there who have been probably playing games far longer than we've been creating games. So for them, they like their games a certain way. And if you want a game to be popular, you've got to appeal to the masses. We realise that not everybody likes shooting games, not everybody likes clockwork creatures, not everybody likes steampunk. So therefore, not everybody is going to like our game. But what we know for certain, because we've heard the feedback, is everybody can agree that our game is beautiful. And I think that's really important when you're playing VR games and when you're creating VR games especially. VR is very much a visual medium. The fact that you are looking around you 360, there should be something to see no matter where you look. Make sure your game has got a rich texture. We also created our game with a rich history as well. When you're writing the game, write it almost like you're writing a movie. Create backstory for the characters. Create backstory for the location you're in. We made sure that in our version of Victorian London, there were posters on the wall. Posters which for us were actually little in-jokes, but also it gave the place a sense of history, a sense of time. The fact that it had been there for a while. It didn't look like it was created yesterday.
I was really surprised by positive reactions to our game. I knew it was good. It's really different when you show to someone and the person is very absorbed in the environment. The other surprise that all of us were amazed at how the game looks like while working on it. It's good to know that people who work on it and test it all the time can be surprised and amazed by something new. That's very good sign.
I quite like a few of the franchise games that have been created, like Rick and Morty, and there's also quite a good Spider-Man simulator as well. I'm a bit of a superhero fan. But I'm also a big fan of shooting games as well. And I know there are an awful lot of shooting games in VR, but I like things like Arizona Sunshine. And I'm also a really big fan of Raw Data as well.
I spent a lot of time playing Farpoint on PlayStation VR, probably because of the aim controller. It's basically something that looks like a gun made from pipes. Plastic pipes, but it's very, very cool, and you feel very natural with that playing that game. I spent also a lot of time playing Project Cars, which is a racing game, but of course with proper racing wheel. I spent also a lot of time playing Super Hot, which is very, very cool, and it's very unique. And I like Robo Recall, which is exclusive for Oculus, but it's quite funny and it has been very well designed, so those are my favorites right now.
I think Everest VR, Farpoint, Robo Recall, Super Hot, accounting, that's brilliant. I really like Richie's playing experience, very simple but awesome. It always works for anyone who's trying VR for the first time. I love to observe people experiencing this title and very often help them to stand still.
Well, at the moment, I'm quite lucky because I've got access to a PlayStation VR and also our Showstorm HTC Vive, which means I've been able to play very much the best of both worlds. One cross-platform game that I'm very much enjoying at the moment is Star Trek Bridge Crew, and also the Rec Room games, things like the paintball and so on. What I'm really enjoying about those is they are social VR games. When you go into a lobby and you see an avatar there, that avatar is actually a real person from another part of the world. And the fact that you can talk to them as a real person in real time, you know, it is the next generation of the old sort of Yahoo chat rooms and things like that. I really like the idea that even though, yes, I may be on my own on my sofa in front of my TV, that I'm still playing as a team with real people from around the world. I think that's fantastic. Where do I see VR going in 2018? Well, for me, it's 3 words. Ready Player One. If you haven't read it yet, Ready Player One is a fantastic pop culture novel about a future where pretty much the entire world plays virtual reality. And there is a movie by Steven Spielberg coming out very, very soon. For me, Ready Player One is going to be a revelation. For me, Ready Player One will do for the 2010s what Lawnmower Man did in the early 90s. It will make VR public consciousness again.
I think more and more people will join VR world, and there will be a lot of companies which are making accessories for VR, like third-party controllers, maybe foot controllers, maybe some extra cameras or something that helps tracking your device. Also, probably there will be solutions for making your headsets wireless, because a lot of people are expecting that. And for sure there will be more big titles, well-known titles on market.
I think that next year will be crucial for VR. As we know, there were and will be revealed some new high-quality head-mounted devices and few web-based platforms and additional devices that helps to make it fun. But I'm still waiting for high-quality platform for real movement. But to be honest, there are some new devices that make it possible when seated, and it works. I think that quite big impulse will be sent by movie business, commercials, and short mobile experiences, as we know that phones today can be very powerful. It's of course not proper experience, VR experience, but I think we shouldn't underestimate it.
I think VR gaming in the future will be quite a bit different, but I think that the act of playing a game in front of a screen with a control pad will become a thing of the past. I think all games will be played in VR, but the experiences will be much more realistic. I think that there'll be a lot more haptic, wearable controllers available, like haptic gloves, haptic suits and that sort of thing. And I think also a lot of research is being done in walking around in VR as well. A lot of people are using teleportation and various other different tricks within the game to make you feel like you're moving around. But I think there'll be new technology very, very soon which simulates movement within VR as well.
I think it will be more mobile device than it is now. For sure it will be wireless, and for sure it will be far more powerful. Maybe it will be independent from the PC or any other device. So for sure graphics will be better, sound will be better. Probably there will be no controllers, you will be controlling everything with your own hands and with your own body.
It will be different, obviously, because of the technology. Wireless headsets, very good binaural audio, very wide angles and resolutions, haptic devices, things like that. It will be different technically, but I hope that the whole technological progress will help creators to reveal their craziest and most epic ideas. And that's technology made for. Someday I think we'll be able to connect directly to the brain, but I don't think it will happen in 10 years. What I'm sure is that we will have huge amount of VR games and experiences, and like other things we will have to learn how to filter them and find the precious ones. There will be many awesome experiences.
Obviously, visually, it will look more and more realistic. I think in 10 years' time, there will be VR games which are almost indistinguishable from reality. And that is going to change the world greatly. Because at the moment, if you want to see the pyramids of Giza, if you want to go to Chichen Itza, if you want to climb the Empire State Building, you've actually got to go to those places. If you can do it from the comfort of your own living room, are people going to necessarily want to travel? Yeah, when the internet first came out, they talked about the idea of a global village, the idea that the world was getting smaller as it was getting more connected. Is the world going to get so small that people are just going to sit on their own with their headset on? Is the only way we're going to interact with people via virtual reality? You know, are two people sat next to each other both going to have virtual reality headsets on? We've already seen it, where people are sat next to each other with their mobile phones and they're not talking to each other, they are texting each other. Is virtual reality going to change the world as we know it? Most definitely.
The most rewarding part was actually at the once the game had been finished, with all the levels, and literally having to go from the start to the end, and just seeing the different levels from as we progressed on.
It was that we were able to finish it, and it's really good. And we didn't know how results would be. What can really expect? The time I spent with all these sounds to achieve some interesting result and help my team to finish SteamHammer, all of it was important. And I felt fulfilled somehow when we released it. The other fantastic thing that happened to me while working on the soundboard was that I could create many music genres, and I feel absolutely free about what tools I want to use for the final result. Everybody wants that. Of course, sometimes I had to admit that it sounds poor, or agree with my teammates that, you know, this is interesting, but we're looking for something else.
One of the things that makes me really happy is SteamHammerVR has been created now. So it's there forever. It exists in reality now forever.
For me, SteamHammerVR has been the culmination of putting together a lot of life skills, I think. For me, designing the characters, I almost went back to my sort of GCSE technology days. You know, getting out a pencil and paper, drawing expanded elevations. And for me, handing on those very simple pencil sketches onto our team, onto Frag, who created the weapons, onto Gesto Jose, who created the clockwork automaton characters, seeing those initial designs suddenly turn into something that is very tangible. The fact that, when you are in that game, they are there. They are genuinely flying at you, and those ravens are coming down from the sky, screeching at you. You do get a very visceral reaction to that. I think for me, taking something that it's just an idea and into a virtual reality, that's very magical, actually. People do call me Magic Martin, but I think, the real magicians are the people like Tom, who has created this incredible virtual world from scratch. People like Chris, who have been taking my initial design sketches and turning them into these lush places. People like Gavin, who have, taken my simple words on the page and turned them into real living, breathing characters. Shamek has been wonderful with creating emotive music. Mark has been very much the leader of the group. I mean, obviously, I've been the artistic director, but to have someone who is an executive producer who is keeping us onto target, onto deadlines, I mean, it's been an incredibly rewarding experience all around. But I think, to prove that a bundle of guys from England and Poland can create something that is potentially being played by people all around the world, that's very rewarding. It's very rewarding indeed.
Oh, hey, music.
I got an email that we are online, actually.
Hey!
Oh, hello!
Hey!
It's done! All publishing tasks have been completed.
Woohoo!
Cheers, everybody.
We're all right. We're off.
Cheers. Yes, we're online.
Gratulacci.
The gold rat. Did you see the gold rat?
SteamHammer, are you reading me?